It is perhaps one of the most common questions I get from folks is what is going to happen with the future of inflation? And it's something I've given a lot of thought to and done a lot of analysis on, and we're going to jump into it here today. For those of you who haven't met me, I'm Shawn McBride. I am a lawyer and also a business consultant, have training as both an attorney and a CPA, and I do a lot of analysis, reading, and work on economics, and it comes into play a lot of times in my legal practice. And when I'm working with business owners and people who are just building for the financial future, they say, what is going to happen? What do you see happening? And that's what we're going to talk about today. My condensed version of what's happening with inflation, where things are headed, and why we may be looking at a different future than the past because of what I'm seeing. So we're going to jump right into it today. We are in a new era as far as investment returns, interest rates, and what we're seeing. And this is largely driven by the U.S. government and its basically uncontrolled spending. If you take a look over at U.S. debt clock, you can see that the U.S. debt is growing and the deficit is also growing. So not only does the U.S. owe a lot of money, approximately $35 trillion on an official basis. Some people will say it's around $200 trillion if you get into the unofficial basis, if you calculate in what the government owes for Social Security, Medicare, other things it's promised to people. We could be talking about $200 trillion of debt. Even $35 trillion of debt spread over the 300 plus million people, whatever the actual number of people in the U.S. is, and I know that becomes a very political question very quickly. Whatever the number of the people are in the U.S., you spread that $35 trillion of debt over them, and you are talking about a lot of debt. U.S. debt clock estimated at over $220,000 per taxpayer when I reviewed it recently. That is a lot of money. So not only are people in debt for credit cards, mortgages, cars, all the things you would expect, but they indirectly owe this debt that the government is going to have to burn off. It'd be one thing if the U.S. government was using a lot of its spending right now and using its deficit to build productive assets. Right? If we were building things, roads, bridges, dams, highways, new areas we can develop, new infrastructure, agriculture, ports, these types of things that would return economic returns. But if you largely look at the U.S. federal government spending, a lot of it is going to what people call entitlements, Medicare, Social Security, and then also the national defense. So money is flowing out, and there doesn't appear to be a lot of areas where the U.S. federal government could easily go in and tweak things and say, let's pull some money back, let's make some savings here. If they're going to save money, they're basically going to have to break a promise to somebody, right? They're going to have to say something to a Medicare or Social Security recipient that, hey, you're getting less money, good luck dealing with that rising insurance bill, that rising property tax bill, that rising maintenance costs on your house. Not only do you have to deal with all of that inflation, but we're going to pull back what we're giving you. So that's not a popular alternative. Cutting back on defense seems to be something the U.S. government is rarely willing to do. And in fact, we have made a lot of global promises, from propping up NATO to the Middle East to, what's going on farther to Eastern Europe. The U.S. government is very entangled in world affairs, and having ships in and out and around China, this becomes very expensive. It doesn't seem like anything that anybody really wants to address. So that amount of money is gone out the door. What we're left with is this $1.7 trillion a year or whatever that is being added to the national debt from the official deficit, and that just keeps growing, and we're looking at the potential for a hockey stick or spiral of expenses and expenditures, right? This is not going to necessarily slow down. This is something that's going to build up over time from what we're seeing. There is no mechanism to get fiscal control. The problem with all this, of course, is what is happening here is what many people will call an indirect tax, right? You look at Peter Schiff, Raoul Paul, Tom Blvd, all these people have done tons of analysis. I've watched a lot of their videos, and they all seem to come to kind of the same conclusion, that this spiraling debt and this more and more money going out is just going to create inflation. Indeed, what the U.S. government is doing is spending more money than what it has coming in. The only way to do that is to create money out of thin air. The U.S. government is, in fact, one of the few people in the world, one of the few governments in the world that can do this on such a large basis. The EU does this to some extent. Other governments have done these deficits, but the U.S. can do it at this exponential level that others can't because the U.S. has been blessed with having the U.S. world reserve currency, at least for the time being. That allows the U.S. to stay focused internally to keep its expenditures going like this. But how long will that last? At the end of the day, in order to do this, Treasury bonds need to be purchased. And a lot of times, the U.S. Federal Reserve is the purchaser. So the U.S. government is just moving money around electronically in ledgers and creating money. The problem with this, of course, is that people ultimately receive this printed money, as they call it, right? This money that's not coming from taxes, that's not coming from some other source, it's just being created by the government. It ultimately goes into the hands of you, me, and other individuals, right? We do our jobs, we do our services, we do the things we do in the economy, we end up with this money. And then we, in turn, of course, need to buy things, and then we, of course, want to buy things, right? So we're participants in the economy. The problem is more and more money goes out, there is more money in the economy, but there's not necessarily more goods or services or things for that money to chase, right? Because the economy is not growing necessarily on a huge basis on real terms. Sure, we've got some technology stuff happening, some innovation, as usual here in the U.S. economy. There are signs of growth, but the growth is not so exponential in this really well-developed economy to make up for the rate of expansion of the amount of money out there. So this means more money growing faster. The money base is growing faster than the amount of goods and services that that money is chasing. The natural effect is inflation, and we saw the effects of this here recently. We had several years where the government spent a lot more money than people brought in, and they didn't grow the amount made. In fact, during some parts of this last 5-year period, we actually had times where we lowered production because people were not working, people were spending time at home, people were not traveling or going to their jobs, and we actually spent more money because we sent out stimulus checks and things as a nation. And so what is that? More money, less goods and services. And of course, we've all seen that when we've gone to the grocery store, when we've seen our insurance bill come in, when we've gone to the car dealership to look at the prices of new and used cars. We've seen all of this flowing into everywhere in the economy. And what is changed now is it looks like this is now a permanent trend. We could potentially have some type of exponential growth in output. People do point to AI, and maybe AI will have some efficiency gains, but it's going to have a lot of disruptions too. I don't think we can rely on technology as being a miracle outcome. So what this means is we have now set this in place. Until this system goes pop, it doesn't appear, regardless of who wins the U.S. elections, regardless of what happens, that anybody is really going to get this system under control. There doesn't appear to be anybody that's going to balance this budget, which means this is going to continue until eventually either other countries stop buying our debt and we can't just keep sending all of it to the Fed because the numbers are going to get so ridiculous here in the U.S. People are going to stop using the U.S. currency as a world reserve currency and start sending those dollars back to the U.S. to redeem them when they no longer need to hold them for transactions internationally, and that is another potential risk. All of this points to higher inflation. So you've been asking my opinion. A lot of people have written to me in different ways, shapes, and forms. Some people on social media. Feel free to comment to this video or whatever form. Other people have reached out to me, and I would like to hear your questions about the future of money, future of business, because that's what we focus on, right? This is not an investment advice channel. Nothing in here is investment advice. This is all about the future of business, and we are talking about what I'm seeing, and I think I see more inflation coming. Really big numbers on a really consistent basis. At some point, the money supply that has been growing is going to be catching up with the fact that the U.S. economy is not producing a lot more goods and services. that's going to mean inflation. And it's going to probably mean, in my opinion, more than the historical inflation levels. So you cannot plan on that. You need to start planning on bigger inflation. If I'm doing projections for myself, if I'm talking to my clients about what's likely to see as they're building their business plans and other things, I'm planning on big inflation. And I think you'd be wise to consider doing so as well. Questions or comments, please drop them below. This is a relaunch of my YouTube channel. We accidentally lost the Future Done Right channel through some administrative stuff, changing email accounts around and all. This is a brand new relaunch, so I look forward to everybody hopefully resubscribing that's been here before. Those that are new, please do subscribe and join me in those comments and let me know what you want to hear about. I'm looking forward to recording more videos, getting back into a regular conversation with you as the days and weeks go by. So thanks for tuning in today, folks. Look forward to seeing you for another video soon.